This conference will now be recorded.
So as an extension of what we discussed yesterday, we covered a few things yesterday, right, about the virtual machines. So what did we see yesterday is about the basics like regions, geographies, and uh, locations, right? And then creation of VMs using Portal, right? This we covered. And what we also covered is like few important things like temporary disk and other stuff, right? Now, to move on further, let us quickly look into the other things with respect to the virtual machines itself, right? So, uh, the discussion that what it will be today will be around the virtual machines and how do we convert the virtual machine into image and deploy VMs using that, right? So in the production world or in the real time world, what you do is you don't use the standard image that what we are using or what we used yesterday, right? So every organization will have a customized image with their what you call softwares installed, basic software that whatever is needed, and then could be some hardening that needs to be done, like OS hardening or application hardening or whatever, and some organization specific settings within that particular virtual machine or server, right? So what we have to do is we have to first build a normal image and then customize the VM to your requirement and then convert it into a image and then use that image to deploy other machines as per your requirement. So that's how things will be in the production world or real-time world. So we'll see how do we create an image and then use that for the deployment of other virtual machines. Okay, so that is the first thing that which we will be seeing. And apart from that, so what we also look today is adding additional disks and network interface cards to a VM, right? This is another thing that which we will look into it. And then how do we change size of a VM, right? So there is a change in your requirement and you want to increase or decrease the resources that whatever you have, which means that there's a change in the size that which you selected earlier versus that what is needed now. So how do we change that, right? And there's something called a locks. If time permits, we'll see locks and then uh, some diagnosis and serial console, right? So these are the things that which we are going to cover today, right? So hopefully we'll reach point 4. Otherwise we will be stopping at point 3 and we'll cover point 4 tomorrow. Yeah, right. So let us quickly jump into the first one, which is converting your virtual machine into an image. Now, as I said, this is a requirement for all of us where you don't use the standard image that whatever you get with Azure. Now, why this is a requirement? It could be a compliance requirement where you need to harden your server. It could be some agents or organization specific requirements of installing certain agents and configuring those agents to point to some servers, right? For example, monitoring or backup, right? And all those things, right? Or it could also be some specific customizations, like so nobody should have access to the registry, certain registry keys, right? The system volume should be kind of hardened enough, not allowing anybody to get into that and make some changes because of your OS file will reside there, right? Now all these things will be there as a part of your customization. That varies from organization to organization. Okay, now, before you go and convert this into image, there are certain things that which we need to take care of. Now, first step, what you do is install OS, right? Install OS. And the second step as a part of this is after installation the OS, you update the required patches, right? Required security patches. right? Which means that latest updates. And then if you have any applications that which has to go on top of it, then you install required apps or agents, right? And then if you need some changes of some registry settings or other things, that will also cover in this part itself, right? Right, all these things will cover in this part, right? If you're not speaking, just go on mute. Okay, thank you. Right, so the other thing that what we need after doing all these things is something called as sysprep, right? This is called as system preparation. Now what does this sysprep do? Why do we need it? Now when you create or install an operating system, there will be certain system specific information or settings, right? Now when you do a sysprep, what it does is, before it converts that, it shuts down the machine, because you select the shutdown of that machine. Before it shuts down the OS, what it does is it removes all the information related to that particular server, right? So what it is trying to do is, it is trying to convert into a general image, rather the image settings that whatever you had when you install the operating system on that particular virtual machine. That's why system preparation is needed. And what it also helps us is in getting rid of some unique identifiers, right? There could be some unique identifiers for the application or for the operating system and so on. Those things also be eliminated or removed. So that's the reason sysprep is needed. Now when you do a sysprep, what you do is you do a sysprep with generalize, and then you shut down, right? So this is the fourth important step. So if you are not doing a sysprep, then you end up in even you can shut it down and convert it to an image, but what will happen is you will get into some issues when you start deploying the virtual machines using that image. So this is very important step. So fourth step we cannot skip. So any OS, Windows OS, you have to run a sysprep, that which is a must. Okay. Then after you are running the sysprep with a generalized option and shut down the machine, then the fourth step what you do is you convert it into image, right? And then you use that image to deploy the virtual machines. Use the image to deploy other machines, VMs, right? So these are the steps. So in all these steps, step number 4 is mandatory and is required. Otherwise, post deployment of your images, you will see issues. Okay. So let us quickly get into this sequence and then try to prepare an image and then convert it into an image, prepare a OS and convert it into image, and then deploy VM using that particular image. Okay. So let's move into our practical, right? So I already have a couple of machines which are provisioned and are ready. Now let us go to VM1 and connect to that particular virtual machine. Right. So once we get into there, we let us assume that we have all the latest patches and other thing. I'm not going to cover all those part, but that is at the OS level that we can do it. But let us try to create couple of folders or files which will help us to identify, when you spin other VMs from this particular image, and we'll be able to say that, okay, this is the image that what we created, and then the images that which are deployed from the base image, or the VMs that which are deployed from the base image, or exactly the replica of that. So for that, what we do is we'll create a couple of folders in the system drive, and then we'll perform a sysprep and then convert it into an image. Okay. taking a little while to load. Let us wait. Yeah, good. Right. So let us say that this is your base image, and then okay, I know. Right. Let us go and create a couple of files and folders on this, or you can install an IIS or some other feature or role just to check. But for this lab purpose, I'll create a couple of folders in our system drive. Okay. Right, let me create a folder with the name okay, image creation lab. Okay, let us create a couple of files in this just for our test purpose. Okay, so that's fine, one file. Now let us say that you are done with your all OS updates and installation of the applications and hardening of your operating system by putting some required settings with the system drive or registry or whatever, right? So every organization will follow their own standards, like few of them will follow something called a CIS benchmark and something like that, right? So let us think that we are done with that part, and then what we have to do as a step 4 is we have to run a sysprep, right? So just go to run and then put a command called sysprep, right? Now it will take you to this location in system system drive, Windows system 32 and sysprep, and then just initiate the sysprep tool. So you see different options here. We will leave it as out of box experience, right? And then you select this generalized option. After this OS is generalized, what we are doing is we are shutting down the machine. So when you perform the sysprep with generalized, as I said earlier, it cleans up all the unique information pertaining to this particular server, and it also removes some of the unique identifiers like some GUIDs related to the application or the operating system, and then it converts into a image. Okay, so this is straightforward. Just select system sysprep and then convert it into a image by selecting the generalize, and then you are shutting down after the sysprep is done. You have another option here to reboot and then quit, but we have to select shutdown because we are converting that into an image. Okay, right. So if you see it, it cleans up certain things and then it generalizes, then it shut down the machine. It will take a couple of minutes.
Hi Vijay, Sachin here. I have a question.
Yes, Sachin.
Like once we run this wrap, if we,
Mm-hmm.
before running this, if we log in with any local profile, so even that local profile will also clean up.
Okay, so basic so basic default profiles that whatever you have will be there. But you are saying that okay, you as a user logged in and configured something. Is that what you are saying?
Yes.
Okay, so that will be there. The data will be there. Data will not be lost. So your profile,
Oh,
individual user profiles will be there. They will not be lost. It's only the system configuration which is kind of need to be cleaned up. Right. So to avoid the conflict of multiple machines, that's all. So that's what it does. So it basically cleans up those unique identifiers. It won't touch any data or any user specific settings.
okay, got it. Thank
Right, so the status of this machine, it changed to stopped. Now we'll discuss what is stopped, and there are other status after when we initiate this, we'll also discuss that. So what we see is the status of this machine is stopped, which means that it is powered off. Now the next step that what we need to do is go and convert this into image. To convert this into image, you have here an option called capture. Right, you can see an option here called capture. So this basically converts this operating system into an image, right? Converts operating system into an image, right? Let us name this image as with some name. Let us say it as uh, production image. Okay, let us say that production image, and you will put that in a resource group like any resource as we discussed the other day. Now you have here an option. If you are from VMware or some other infrastructure background, the same thing will be there, right? So whether you want to delete the virtual machine after converting this into an image, so you don't want to keep that and have a storage utilized, so you can go and delete it. Okay, so we'll take that question, right? So we are converting this into image, and then what we are doing is we are putting that into a resource group, and you select this option, then the image whatever we created will be deleted, otherwise a copy of that will be taken and then it will be converted into an image file. So I want to keep that virtual machine as it is, and then I'll create it. I'll create a image. Now, if you want to go with resiliency, zone resiliency, and other thing, you can select this. It basically creates a copy of image in different geographical locations, right? So I don't want to do that. Let us create or convert that into image, right? Now there are multiple phases that which are there here. You can see it. It is again, gets into a state of stopping the virtual machine, and then it validates the sysprep and then converts into an image. Like 3 or 4 steps within this particular process. Okay, so let that go on. Now what we'll do is we'll move into our other concept. So it will take another 5 to 10 minutes, or at least 5 minutes for that to complete. So let us not wait for that. Let that run in the background. Okay. So the Prakash, I don't have any programming knowledge. Can I do this course for sure? Okay, yeah, Prakash. So you can do it. There is no programming knowledge required. The only thing is you need to understand how do we write few command lines and then use a PowerShell command line tools to perform the tasks, right? Or if you are good in programming, they can use a .NET, Visual Studio .NET, or some other coding stuff to write some code to provision the resources and other stuff, right? So you can do it. That should not be a problem. Let us move on. So what we had done is we are done with creation of the image. Now let us quickly look at the properties of virtual machine before while that gets provisioned. Okay, so let us quickly look into the properties of the virtual machine and try to understand what are the different options that which we have and what is the importance of what option. Okay, so we have another virtual machine which is called as VM2. Let us use this for our discussion. Okay, the first and foremost thing that what I would like to discuss is the status. The status is of multiple, you have multiple statuses of a virtual machine, right? Now, what are the different states? One is running, right? Which means that your VM is up and running. So it's straightforward. There's something called as stopped. There's something called as stopped. And there's one more status which is called as stopped and then deallocated. Deallocated. There's a difference between these two, right? And then starting and stopping, those are all other status. Starting and then stopping. Straightforward to understand, right? Right. Now let us discuss about what is the difference between stopped and deallocate. That is which is very important. The way how you power off your virtual machine will define whether it will be in a stopped state or whether it will be in a stopped and deallocated. When you power off a virtual machine or stop a virtual machine using this option, that what you see here on your console, a stop button, then it moves to a state called stopped and deallocated. If you get into the operating system and shut down the machine, then it will get into a state called stopped. right? So there is a difference. So the difference is, a stopped is when you get into the VM and power it off or shut down. Stop deallocate is when you stop it from the console. Now what is this difference? When you deallocate, what it means that it is deallocating the resources or releases the resources used by VM. Now what are those resources that can be released? A CPU of the VM, memory of the VM, right? These are the two things that can be released when it comes to compute. The storage on which this VM resides will be intact, which means that it will not remove the storage. Because you are not releasing the storage, or you are not removing the disks or whatever is there on the storage, your VM is still there, right? But the CPU and memory, which can be reallocated, are released. The other things that also released includes your IP addresses. IP addresses. Now, if you are not using a static IP address, when we say static, it is binded to that particular virtual machine, right? Static IP address is an IP address which is reserved to that machine. Opposite to that is dynamic IP address, right? So if you are using a dynamic IP address, specifically the public IP addresses, they will also be released. So when you move a virtual machine into a deallocated state, there are certain resources that which will be released. There are certain resources which need to be there, will be there, which is nothing but your storage, right? So how is that it is advantage? So what is the advantage that which I am going to get if I deallocate? There is a reduction in the billing reduction, right? Because you are not using CPU memory and the IP address which is of minimal cost, public IP address, when I say public IP address here, okay, which costs that will be reduced, right? These will be reduced, but your storage cost is still there, right? Storage cost is still there. Why? Because you are using the storage and you are keeping your virtual machine within the storage. When you power it on, then it allocates again the CPU memory, and it may allocate a different IP address. It won't allocate the same IP address that what it was allocated earlier. It may assign a new IP address because you released it, that might have been assigned to some other resource within the Azure, right? So that is what we need to understand about, stopped and deallocated, right? Stopped, deallocated. Whereas stopped is you are powering off, you are still utilizing your memory, CPU, whatever is assigned to this particular machine is still assigned, which is not released. The IP address is also still assigned, not released, and storage anyway will be there, right? So that is the difference between stopped and stop deallocated. So one thing which we need to understand is when you want to deallocate, power it off or stop it from here, from the console. If you want just normal stop, then do it from the operating system. There will be charges for stopped. There will be charges only for storage when you go with stopped / deallocated. Okay, right? Now let us quickly go and see how it is, right? So you can see it. Public IP so and so will be lost when you stop the VM because it will be released, right? Do you want to reserve this IP address? You can select this and you will get the same IP address, right? So because I didn't convert this particular IP address into a static IP address which is reserved, That's the reason it is asking me a question whether you want to have this reserved. Okay, so I don't want that. So if I go and click on stop, then it changes the status to deallocation. If you see, I think it should, you can see this status, it's changing to deallocating, right? Which means that it is releasing those resources. Releasing those resources, right? Refresh, it will move to a state called stopped deallocated. Okay, so the other states of the virtual machines are simple, straightforward to understand. Running means up and running. Stopped, we discussed. When your machine is booting, it moves into a state called starting, and then when you're shutting down, stopping, right? So these are the different states of your virtual machine. Okay, now you can see this moved into a state called stopped and deallocated state, right? So that's how you can convert, change that into stop deallocate. Okay, any questions on this? Okay, so I'll take it as no. Then we'll see, we'll go back and see where our image creation is. Right, you can see it successfully created an image, right? You can go and use that particular image. Okay, so what we did, we created an image, right? Till this step we are done. Now what we have to do is, now we have to use that particular image to deploy our virtual machines. Now how do I use that image? It's normal VM provisioning, right? How you provision a virtual machine, the same way you will provision the virtual machine, but you select the image from the list of images that which you created. Then we'll see how do we do it. Just quickly spin a machine using that. Okay, so I'll say that image VM, just to understand that it is created from image. I'll go and browse all images. Okay, so this is where you find the image that which you created. Now in the marketplace, you will get the standard images whatever are provided by Azure, but we want to go with a custom image. Where do I find it? I find that under my items. So all the custom images that which are created by you are available under my items within the image. So what you do, you go to the browse images and then go to my items, then you will find the image that which you create, the base image that whatever you created, right? So you select that particular image, right? And one thing that which very important thing that what we need to understand here is, whatever the location that which the image has, or whatever the location in which the image is in, it will be, selected. So you cannot change the location here, right? So that's why it is grayed out. And other stuff, whatever we follow for the normal virtual machine creation, has to be followed for this one as well. Okay, so only thing that what we need to understand is, go and select a custom image, and that custom image will be in the region where the image is located. So the VM that whatever you are creating has to be created in the same region where your image is. Okay, now let us go and put the other items, other entries that whatever are needed. Right, username, password. I want to use port 3389 to connect to this because I'm using RDP. I don't have licenses, right? Disks, I'll leave them as it is. Networking also, I will leave it as it is, the default one that whatever it picks, right? I will disable the diagnostics and go and create a virtual machine, right? We'll discuss all those options now, whatever the items that which we skipped. Today itself we'll be discussing all of them, but this is how you can create a virtual machine. Now you can use some ARM templates that which we'll be discussing, or some PowerShell deployment scripts, or Azure CLI script or Visual Studio.NET code to deploy multiple images, multiple VMs using that image that which you created, right? So that we'll be covering in one of our labs. How do we create multiple images using multiple VMs using a single image, right? So that's how it will be in production. You will not sit and select each and every item and put the input there and then create it, right? So we'll see that in one of our labs, right? So what we did, we deployed a VM using the image. Let that VM get provisioned. Okay, let that get provisioned. We'll go back to some other topic now. Right, so we had seen different status of the virtual machine. The next thing that what we'll look into is there is a requirement to add additional disks. Okay, there is a requirement to add additional disks. All right, additional disks, which is nothing but your data disks, which is nothing but your data disks. So if you're not speaking, please go on mute. It disturbs others. Thank you. Data disks. Now, during the creation of VM itself, you can assign it, right? During the creation of VM itself, you can assign it. You can also assign the disk after the VM is created, right? So for any VM, that can be done. Now, how can we accomplish that, or how do we do it? Just go to the VM. You have an option here called disks, right? You have an option here called disks. By default, you will have a OS disk, right? So the OS disk is the disk that which we assigned during the installation or creation of the virtual machine. Now, other than that, if you want to add data disks, you have an option here to add data disk, right? All you need to do is just go and click add data disk, right? So if you already have a disk readily available, it will show in the drop down box. Because we don't have any disk which is readily available, we have to create it, right? So how do I create an additional disk? When you click on the drop down box, you will see an option here called create disk, right? You can go and select that. Then it will take me to a blade where it will ask the details, like disk name, what type of disk you want, premium, standard, within standard SSD or HDD, right? And what is the capacity of the disk that which you want? These are the questions that which will be asked. So I'll put as disk 1, right? And I have to put that in a resource group. And then I need, let us say, standard SSD. I just need 10 GB, right? I just need 10 GB. One thing that what we need to observe here is we'll be discussing this in our storage classes. The performance of the disk changes based on the size, right? So the IOPS limit changed to 500 when it is 100 GB, and it further reduces when it is 10 GB. So why and other things we will be discussing that in our storage class, but just remember that for now, okay? Just remember it. So what we did, we created a disk, right? Just click on create. A disk of 10 GB is created. It is validating. Once it validates, and then it creates. Okay, validation and creation. Right. It may take a little while for that to provision. Right. So you have the disk created. You can see disk is readily available. Right. Now to assign this particular disk, it is not yet assigned. Right. So I select it and save it. Then only that particular disk will be assigned. Right. I have to save the configuration. Right. So then it will attach that particular disk to the operating system. So when you attach this disk to operating system, it is attached as a raw disk, right? So in a physical system or in a virtual machine, so the same thing will happen. It will assign as a raw disk. Then you have to convert that into a volume by formatting and doing other required actions, right? Assigning the drive later and so on, right? So same thing here. So another important thing that what we need to understand here is that we discussed that yesterday as well, right? So every item that what you assign to a virtual machine is a resource, independent resource, right? So if you go to the resource group and look at this resource group where this VM is in, all these items are independent, which means they can be deleted, detagged anytime. So disk 1 is again a separate resource that which it got created, right? So what we need to understand is you can have a resource created and tag it, or you create a resource, right, and assign it, right? So what we did right now is we created a resource and assign it. If you want that to be readily available, if you want that to be created before the VM creation itself, we can do it. Now how do I do that? Just go to the blade of disk creation, right, or disks, right? You can see a service called disks, right? From this disk service you can create a disk as well. Now these are the different disks that which are already there, right? The disk one is what we just created. This image is the one which is created for your image that which you just provisioned from your base image, and so on, right? So all the disks of your entire environment are available within the disk service. You can also create a disk from here rather creating from there. The same questions that whatever you had seen there are available here, right? So likewise, you can create a disk and attach from here, or you can create a disk from the virtual machine disks option and then assign it from there, right? So this is how you can assign a disk. Let us quickly get into the VM and see whether the disk is attached or not, and then we'll see how do we convert that into a volume, right? Download, log into the VM. So we need to get into the disk management and see whether the disk is mounted or attached or not. Then just convert that into a volume. So that's where the assignment of the disk for this VM will complete. Seems I need to select a VM with a little bit more resources. Right, while this spins up, well, it gets loads. Where, what is the status of our image deployment, right? You can see the VM that which we created from the image is also deployed, right? Is also deployed. So it is up and running. We'll get into that once we complete this disk management stuff. Or we'll access this one as well. Yeah, we'll get into this image and see whether we have the folders and files that which we did put during the creation, which means that the image whatever we are getting into is a copy of a replica of the base image that which we created. So this is the image that which is this is the VM which is deployed from your base image, right? And if you go to Windows Explorer and then look for the files, the folders that which you created. Right, so you can see the image is deployed from the image that this VM is deployed from the image that which we created. So this is just a simulation, but what I said will be the standard process in the production environment, and this is how you can create multiple images using the base image. Okay, let us get back to our we have our own way of doing this. Okay, right, so let us get into disk management. Okay, and see whether the disk that which we attached is available or not. You can see the disk 2 is allocated, which is of 10 GB. You can convert that into a volume and start using it, right? So that's how you can allocate additional disk or number of disks that whatever you want to the machines within the Azure. Okay. Any questions on this disk management part or the image creation? Both of them. If no questions, then we'll move to our next topic. Okay, I'll take it as no. Let us move on to our next topic, which is additional network interface cards. Okay, NIC cards. So there will be a requirement most of the time where you may have to have more than one network interface card assigned to your virtual machine. There could be a number of reasons. You might want to have a communication to this virtual machine from two different networks. That it could be one reason. There could be another reason of if you are taking the backup of the virtual machine, then you want to you want the backup to happen on a different network altogether, right? So for all these different requirements, we may get into a situation where we may have to have multiple network cards assigned to a particular virtual machine. So that's how it will be, right? And in Azure also, you can assign multiple network cards, and we'll quickly see how do we do that. Okay, so to assign a network interface card, you have an option here within the networking, right? There's a setting called networking, right? So what you see here, two options, right? Attach a network interface card detach a network interface card. Now, when I click on the option called attach network interface card, if there is already a NIC card which is readily available, I can select it from the drop down list, right, and assign it. If the network interface card is not available, then what you need to do is you have to create a new one and then assign it, right? So let us quickly create a new network interface card for this particular virtual machine. Okay, now let us say that secondary NIC for this VM, and every network interface card will have an IP address which it picks from the subnet, right? That's what we discussed the other day, right? So let it pick from the subnet whatever we have here. If you have multiple subnets, you can select it, but we have only one subnet, then it means that it picks an IP address from the 10.x range, right? And do you want to attach any network security groups, which means that firewall rules? For this demo, there will not be any network security group attached, so we'll leave it as it is. And then where this should go into, which network, which resource group it should get into. Basic standard questions, right? Let us go and create a NIC card. Okay. Now what we did, we created a NIC card. And this NIC card, you can attach it to the virtual machine. Okay. Can assign it to a virtual machine. So let that get created. Then we'll get into the image and then virtual machine and assign that to the virtual machine that which we are on. Now, while that gets created, so couple of things. So you cannot assign a network interface card when the virtual machine is on. So to assign or tag a new network interface card, you have to power off the virtual machine. So during the when the VM is up and running, you will not be able to assign a network interface card. That is something that which we need to know, right? So you can assign a NIC card only when VM is taken down, right? This is very important. Right? That means there is a downtime. Right, so you have your additional network interface card created, right? Successfully created a new network interface card with the name SecNIC. Now you have a network interface card. Let us try to assign it to the virtual machine, right? Let us see what happens. So you are assigning that to a VM which is up and running. So what it says is you'll not be able to assign it when the VM is up and running. So what you need to do is you need to take off the virtual machine and then assign the network interface card to it. So for that, you need to go and power off the virtual machine and assign it. So let us quickly do it. Okay. Let us quickly power off from here and then assign the network interface card. So you should be doing from the VM. Within the VM, you have to go and power it off. But for the lab purpose, we can do it. Right, it will change the status. So once that powers off, we can go back to the same location of networking and select attach a network interface card or associate a network interface card and select the network interface card what we created. Right, you can see it is in a stop state. We'll go to the networking and then attach network interface card. Right, you should be able to see that here. What happened? Some reason it is. You can also see the list of network interface cards in the network interfaces as well. Right? You see this. To which region we created it. So it should be in the same region where it is. Okay, fine. We'll power it off and power it on, and then we'll come back to that and we'll power it off once again. Then maybe it will detect it. Let us power it on and then take it off again. Then we'll try to assign it. But that's a standard way. You will be able to see that in the drop down list. We'll come back to that once that is up and this thing. Okay. Now, once that is up, till that is up, we'll cover one more topic, something called as locks. Okay. Now, there could be a situation where you may accidentally delete the virtual machines, right? You may accidentally take off certain things, right? So that's why there is something called as lock, right? So which basically what it does is it avoids the accidental deletion of certain resources. So if you create a lock, you will not be able to delete if you select the type as delete, right? So you are locking the deletion of a particular resource, so which avoids accidental deletion of your resources, right? If it is read only, people will not be able to make changes to this particular resource, here in our case a virtual machine, right? So based on your requirement, you can convert this particular, if you want to have some control in place, you can either avoid deletion, or if you don't want any changes to happen for that matter for this particular resource, in our case this VM, then you can go and put that into a read-only mode, right? So either one, based on your requirement, you can go and select, right? To avoid accidental deletion, that is one. To avoid changes to this particular virtual machine. But the people, whoever has got access to this particular layer, right, to this particular setting, will be able to go and remove it, and then only somebody will be able to delete the VM, or if it is read only, then somebody will be able to make the changes. Okay, so there is something called as role-based access control, which can control access to this locks option, that which we will be discussing in one of our classes. But what we need to understand is, not for everybody you will have access to this lock option, and you will have access to those set of people who are in a position to manage the entire environment. They can go and set a lock to a resource, and that resource lock, based on the type that what you selected, appropriate settings will be applied to that particular resource. Now, if you want to delete this, then if I don't have permissions, then I'll be going to go and ask the person who has got access to this, and he validates the request and changes this setting so that necessary changes can be done. Okay, so that is the advantage of using the lock. So when I go and put this lock for deletion blocks, let us say the name, and blocks the or avoids deletion of VMs, right? Avoids deletion of VMs, right? So you can create a resource, you can create a lock for that particular resource. Now if you try to delete VM2, it will say that there is a lock, you will not be able to delete it. Then what we have to do, you have to go and remove this lock, then only you will be able to go and remove the virtual machine, right? So that is something that which is very important, and we can put that in place if you want to kind of sorry, if you want to go and restrict the accidental deletion of your virtual machines. Okay, so let us quickly go back. See, I think there is some problem with this VM. It says maintenance already updated and so on. We'll try to get into some other VM and see if we can assign that particular network interface card to that particular VM. Let us get into our image that which we created. So I'll just go and stop from the operating system and then try to assign that network interface card. Right, so that is about locks. Okay, so locks, we can use it in our production environment for our critical what do you call it as resources, to avoid accidental deletion or to avoid configuration changes. So that's where you can use the locks. If you have a very critical application which are not allowed changes just like that, these are the things that which can be used to restrict the changes, right? So any questions on the locks that whatever we just discussed? These are small topics, but very important when it comes to the VM settings and other stuff, right? So you can see the state of image VM is stopped. We'll see if we will be able to see that network interface card that what we created. Yeah, yes, right? So this is a secondary network interface card we created. We can go and assign the secondary interface card to this VM, right? So likewise, you can create deallocated. Likewise, you can go and create multiple network interface cards and assign it to the VM, right? We can convert this into deallocated. Some reason it is giving some issue. Ideally, when you deallocate, it should assign it, but for some reason today it is kind of giving some trouble. Let that get deallocated. So we are done for the time is up, right? So we'll quickly tag this network interface card, then we'll look at the other topics that what we have to cover today, right? So there are two other topics, right? That serial console, this we covered. Diagnosis and serial console we'll cover tomorrow, right? Because it's already 8, so we'll try to assign this network interface card to the VM and then we'll wind up for today. So if you are putting that all these things in a PowerShell code, then you have to first create a interface card and tag it. So the same thing that what we are doing. So tomorrow or day after tomorrow, we'll also set up the environment and understand what are those things with PowerShell that which are needed to use a PowerShell command lines. And there are some modules that needs to be imported, Azure modules and other stuff. That will time permits tomorrow we'll see, otherwise it will be part of our day after tomorrow's class, and then we'll see how do we create VMs and network interface cards and other stuff parallelly with portal as well as with the PowerShell. Okay. taking some time to deallocate. So while this gets deallocated, if you guys have any questions, we can take any questions relating to anything. It's very slow. Seems it is taking more time. So what we'll do is we'll cover this the first step tomorrow session, and then we'll relook at this deallocation and then assign the network interface card to this VM. So that's straightforward. For some reason, it seems that there are some performance issues. It's straightforward after deallocation when we select a network interface networking and then attach network interface card. Then you select it and say okay, then it should automatically assign that particular network interface card to the machine. So looks like there are it's a little slow today. Otherwise it's a straightforward stuff. Okay, so we will continue with this lab tomorrow with the same network interface card assignment, and then we'll move to the other labs. Okay, so for tomorrow's topic, what we will be looking at is we're looking at the serial port access in case if your VM is down, and how do we basically try to get into at least the command prompt, or how do I look at the status of my virtual machine, right? So that's what we'll discuss tomorrow, and then we'll also look at how do we configure and install PowerShell stuff, and then we'll see how do we deploy images using PowerShell, and from there on we'll move on to the next topics. Okay, so because it is taking more time, so we'll kind of catch up tomorrow. Then we'll continue with the network interface card stuff. Okay, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. If you don't have any questions, I think we are done for today. Okay, so we'll catch up tomorrow, guys. It's already 8:10. Thanks for your time and have a great day or good night.
Thank you. Bye.